Let's get some business news for you now. Brian Quinn is with us in the studio. And Brian, we're going to start with a surprise move from the head of the central bank in the United States.
That's right. The U.S. Federal Reserve announced an emergency interest rate cut on Tuesday. It's the largest since the 2008 financial crisis. The half-point cut puts the Fed's benchmark rate at 1 to 1.25%. That decision, a reversal from the bank's position last week when Fed officials appeared to have decided a rate cut could wait until the next scheduled meeting later this month. It comes one day after the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development warned that worldwide economic growth could be cut in half for the year if the outbreak intensifies. Fed Chair Jay Powell laid out the case for the rate cut at a press conference today. Here he is.
The virus and the measures that are being taken to contain it will surely weigh on economic activity, both here and abroad, for some time. We are beginning to see the effects on the tourism and travel industries, and we are hearing concerns from industries that rely on global supply chains. The magnitude and persistence of the overall effects on the economy, however, remain highly uncertain, and the situation remains a fluid one.
Well, that surprise rate cut came on the heels of a conference call between finance ministers and central bankers from the G7 group of Western nations on Tuesday that aimed at coordinating their response to the coronavirus and its economic fallout. A statement released afterwards affirms the country's commitment to, quote, use all appropriate tools, promising both fiscal and monetary policy measures where appropriate. G7 member Italy has already announced some 4.5 billion euros worth of tax relief and economic support as it faces the largest viral outbreak outside of China. Some policymakers at the European Central Bank have signaled their opposition to new interest rate cuts here, but the ECB is reportedly working on a plan to boost cheap loans to businesses affected by the outbreak. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire alluded to that plan earlier on Tuesday. Here he is.
We expect solidarity and flexibility from all European institutions. Solidarity, meaning the capacity of each of us to play a role. Within the European Central Bank, there are also existing resources to support the finance of small and medium-sized businesses, which could be one of the options that could be on the table.
Over on the markets, a volatile trading day. Plenty of investors had already priced in a 0.5% rate cut by the Fed at their meeting later this month. Those investors getting plenty nervous over Tuesday's urgent action. Yields on U.S. Treasury bonds have fallen to record lows as investors head to safe havens. Major swings on Wall Street today. The Dow currently down around 2.2%. S&P 500 and the Nasdaq in similar positions. European shares ended the day in positive territory despite falling back from much larger gains earlier in the day. New data shows Eurozone inflation slipping in February as energy prices fell on weakening demand. London, Paris, and Frankfurt stock exchanges, although still finishing up in the neighborhood of 1%. Here in France, President Emmanuel Macron has announced the requisition of all protective face masks and production in response to the viral outbreak. Shortages of both masks and hand sanitizing gel have been reported, with Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire threatening price controls amid reports of gouging. A large portion of Western medical supplies come from China, whose supply chains are already severely disrupted by the virus. Those shortages leading to a big boost in business, though, for French firms that do produce products like sanitizer and thermometers, as Ellen Gainsford and our colleagues at France Télévisions report.
This French factory is working at full tilt to meet its orders for hand sanitizer gel. With a rise in demand following the coronavirus outbreak, it's now producing 60,000 bottles a day.
We are producing about 50% more than we normally do.
With this boost in production, they've had to hire extra hands and now have around 10 temporary workers on top of the 44 permanent staff.
Since the crisis started, we have extended working hours. There's a shift from 10 to 6 a.m., so production is 24 hours a day, 6 out of 7 days a week. We're rolling up our sleeves and getting on with it.
Sales of hand sanitizer gel have shot up by 91% since January, and demand for thermometers is also high. This is the only factory that produces them in France. 70% of France's thermometer supply is imported from China. But with supply chains disrupted by the coronavirus, demand for French-made products is up.
I recruited one employee 2 weeks ago. If demand continues like this, then I'll be happy to hire 1 or 2 more people by the end of the year.
The French economy minister has called the outbreak a globalization game changer that reveals the West's over-reliance on foreign countries for industrial parts and medical supplies.
Well, China, meanwhile, has announced its latest economic measures aimed at limiting the damage to the world's second largest economy from the virus outbreak. Chinese economic growth is projected to fall to as low as 3.5% in the first quarter of 2020. That's down from over 6% before the outbreak, already at a 3-decade low. In addition to spending some 14 billion euros on limiting the spread of the coronavirus, Beijing says it has provided businesses with around 128 billion euros in relief from social insurance payments in a bid to kickstart production. The finance ministry says tax relief will continue in 2020. Take a listen.
With the implementation of gradual reductions in social insurance for the elderly, unemployment and work-related injuries, we expect to cut the total tax burden on enterprises by over 65 million euros in 2020.
And some more of the day's top business headlines we're following for you at this hour. South Africa's economy recorded negative growth for the final 3 months of 2019, marking the second consecutive quarter of decline and the country's third official recession since the end of apartheid in 1994. South African Statistics Bureau noting weak agricultural output and transportation as the main drags on growth last year. Chinese industrial conglomerate Jingye Group says its deal to rescue British Steel will be completed next week. The formerly state-owned UK steelmaker went bankrupt in May amid competition from China and Brexit uncertainty. 3,200 of the company's 5,000 jobs will be saved, but the deal does not include British Steel's small French unit. Jingye says the French government has not yet agreed to the acquisition. And finally, for business, Unilever has reached an important milestone for gender equality. The Anglo-Dutch company makes consumer products ranging from Ben & Jerry's ice cream to Dove soap. It now says it has achieved gender balance across its global management team. Half of the company's 14,000 managers are now women. That's up from 38% in 2010. Unilever, also one of the best performers in the UK government's gender pay gap report. The company's median hourly pay for women is actually higher than it is for men. Unfortunately, kind of a rare situation, but one bright spot at least, Laura.
Brian, thank you very much indeed. That's it for the business. We're taking a short break. Don't go away.